In this part of the documentation, we're going to look at the RNG system that I've spent the last couple days figuring out. And mainly it just has to do with this subroutine, or at least this is the subroutine responsible for updating the RNG values. So you'll see 5 RAM addresses referenced here, and I have put them all into RAM watch so we can see what they do. This one here is just a frame counter, so it's just going to increase by 1 every time the game advances a frame, except in some cases when the CPU is in a different mode, you'll see that times when this frame counter is red, it's actually not updating. But and so that happens while the game is loading stuff. If you have the frame counter open when you transition into caves, for example, it'll turn red. But other than that, it will increase by 1 every frame. However, it is only 1 byte, so you will see after it reaches 255, it rolls back over. And then for the other values, 81 and 82 are the main RNG values of the game. And 7C and 7D are referenced in there, but they're just the game is just storing data there temporarily. Those are first page addresses. I think that it's just storing temporary values in these addresses. The main parts are this frame counter and these 2 RNG addresses. So if we go back into the subroutine, I can sort of step through everything that the game does. The main register of the CPU is called the accumulator. So this, a lot of the instructions are load to the accumulator and store in the accumulator. So that's just a value that this game is using to do the math here. So it loads this 81, which is it's the first RNG address, into the accumulator. It adds it to the other one, so it's just adding together the 2 RNG values. And now this here is an XOR. For whatever reason, it's EOR instead of XOR here, but that is XOR. And it is XORing it with 97A, which, if you'll remember, is the frame counter. So that confirms what we sort of already knew, is that the game has an RNG system as well as it being dependent on which frame of the game you do something. I had actually previously found 81, the RAM address, and thought it might have been responsible for some of the RNG in the game. Like you'll remember I posted in the Discord a couple days ago about that. But when I froze it, some actions in the game still varied. So what I had to do was search through here to find the places where that RAM address is modified in the game, and that led me here. And so you can see that by XORing it with the frame counter, both are sort of taken into account. So it just stores this result into 7C. That's putting that value there for now. Then it loads the accumulator with 81 again. It adds this 41, which this is hex, so it's actually 65 decimal. I think it's honestly just like a number that they picked just to add to it, just to sort of increase the randomness. And then it stores that back at 81. It adds 7C, which 7C is storing the result of the previous stuff it was doing, the XOR. Then it subtracts back out 81, which is kind of inefficient, but whatever, and stores that in 82, as well as 7C plus 1, which is 7D. So that's the last value that I have in the RAM watch here. And then it just loads it with 7C at the end, but that is it. So the main parts of it are taking these two values and adding them. There's an XOR, adds a constant. That's pretty much it. Pretty simple, but effective, like for what they wanted to do. It's simple enough that this won't take any time at all to run, even on 20-year-old hardware. So if we go back into the game, we can see once we get to menus, that was some of the red frames there. It'll start updating these values, or well, it's doing in the menus, but it'll also update it in game. So now we've got the frame counter, and we've got if I just step through frames here, this one's just increasing by 1, and it's going to roll over here. But then these, both 81 and 82, are essentially random values, 0 to 55 every frame. So if I let it load some trash, and then freeze all of these values, so now no more RNG. If I start shooting stuff, then we'll quickly start to see whatever the particular RNG is for the situation, which looks like donut coming in from this side at this angle, going up this way. So they'll all be the same object. I'll go more into depth on how the trash objects work in a separate video just about trash. But you can also see if I go into caves, let me unfreeze these before I do that. And then, so during this transition here, because this save state is just during the transition into caves, the RNG values here are actually 0. They're just sort of reset. You can see we're in the other mode of the CPU, so this isn't incrementing, and these are 0. So whatever we're stuck with is what we're gonna. That's all the values that the game has in order to seed this cave. So you saw it's 117 on the frame counter, and that produced this example of caves here. So just as a demonstration, the first level here is 5 plus 2, and then we've got 8 plus 5 and 7. But if I go back and poke this address to something else, just like rented by 1, for example, we'll get a completely different set of caves, different locations, different numbers, etc. So the game's using RNG here too, and if I go into ship, same thing. Actually, if I freeze the addresses here, ship basically won't start, because I believe it also uses the frame counter for this sort of cutscene part at the beginning. So the game will just halt, but if I freeze it after it's already started, we'll see that it gives me the same problem every time. So we've got 5 plus 2, 8, 7, 9, 12. The game always runs slowly like this when you have RAM watch open. So. And it should, yep, it's just going to get keep giving me the same problem. Actually, because it's in the second slot, I can just keep holding the up and right. But yeah, that's just sort of to demonstrate that these are the universal RNG values throughout the whole game. They're not single purpose or anything. They're universally what the game uses to determine all of its randomness in all parts of the game. So we've got trash seeding, cave seeding, problems for a ship. It also governs like the lava bursts, or whatever, that drop from these things here. you'll notice is they won't drop any at all, because how those things work is when the RNG values hit particular values, it will drop one. So every value that you freeze it at is either one where nothing will ever spawn, or it will constantly be spawning them. And obviously there are going to be more of the values where it isn't spawning them, so we've just sort of stopped that part. And that's pretty much how the RNG works. There's still more I need to look into in terms of like how exactly it goes from these RNG values to the position and angle and such when it spawns a new trash piece, for example, in order to have a more full understanding. And then from that point, you could just have a program or something that automatically tells you what the best frame is to spawn a piece of trash if I was working on the task or something. But like I said, each of the 3 sections of the game probably need their own part of documentation. I've probably done a lot of the work already for trash and caves, but I'm not sure exactly when to actually compile those into a video, because there's always more to find out. I don't know if I'm gonna eventually need to have a second video on trash, for example, but I'll see. Hopefully one of those will come up, maybe even in the next week, because now I have a lot of free time to look into this stuff. But I will see you on the next part.